The hinge is a very important component of the delivery, but not a lot of athletes know how to use it to their maximum capabilities. And there's another extremity of athletes that quite simply have no hinge. So within their delivery, what this will kind of look like is once they lift and they get into the stride phase, their back leg will tend to rotate quickly, which then will cause the trunk to also dump out. So once this has happened, the athlete has lost a large amount of energy that he could have used to deliver on through the front leg and help that transfer upwards the trunk and out through the fingertips. Why exactly does that happen, and what can we do to fix that? Now, before I go ahead and get started on this, my name is Anthony Rodriguez, coach and founder of Versatile Athletics, where we helped over 190 plus athletes increase their velocity, move pain-free, and help them understand how their bodies prefer to move so that they can get the recognition that they deserve. Now, why do a lot of athletes lose their hinge? This could come from a variety of different reasons as to not having enough posterior strength. This is strengthening of their back muscles like the glutes, the upper back, the lower back. This could also come from a lack of mobility, or maybe tightness in certain areas of their body like the adductors, which would then cause the body to really dip on more quickly. Maybe they may have different anatomical limitations, having too much hip internal rotation. Maybe they're hypermobile. They have no idea of where their body is in space. And a much bigger piece that not a lot of people know about is it could also be affected by the way that you're using your trunk. Now, to define the trunk is not only just the abdominal area. When we speak about the trunk, we speak about from the shoulders all the way down through the glute, right? That is what we call the trunk. Now, why is the trunk very, very important? Well, the spine plays a large role in how your hip open, how your hip closes, and how you stay stacked. For example, we can include more spinal bending. You guys can notice this. If you bend towards one side, your hip would tend to more than likely open up on the other side. If you bend on the other side, your hip would then more than likely tend to open up on the other side. It plays a role in flexion and extension. So if you get the trunk to flex a little bit more, you will notice more posterior tilt of the glutes. And if you tend to extend more, you will notice more anterior tilt of the glutes or the pelvis. Now, for a lot of athletes that lose their hinge very quickly, they have a problem staying stacked. When their trunk, in other words, more specifically their pelvis, tends to fall on forward, the upper half then leaks out, which causes them to either spin out and around or maybe forward flex. So what are some things that we can do in that scenario? We can work on pelvic posterior tilt. Now, posterior tilt would be important because just as we mentioned, right, thinking about the trunk, if we flex the trunk down, the pelvis is going to get that upward tilt, which is going to keep it almost more stable rather than out, which is not going to aid us in holding this back leg flexion. Now, if we kept the pelvis more of a posterior tilt, we'll be able to almost like keep the pelvis in line as we're riding down the mound. Therefore, your hinge would improve and the weight transfer and energy transfer will also improve. Now, what are some ways that we can improve pelvic posterior tilt? Number one, I like doing high box drills. In this drill, you're gonna have your lead leg on top of a box, where now we're focusing more on that pelvic posterior tilt, kind of thinking tucking the pelvis under you so you can use that to ride down and feel that stacking position. You can also do swinging leg lift throws, where now we're incorporating more of a dynamic movement. And with the leg swing, right, all that we're focusing on is really feeling, get this pelvic posterior tilt where the pelvic tucks under our trunk, and it allows us to get into that hinge within the stride phase. Now, there's more things that we can also do instead of pelvic posterior tilt. We can also have counter rotation of the pelvis. If we get counter rotation of the pelvis, we could also do this with forward spine bending. We can keep the trunk a little bit or the pelvis a little bit more close as we're riding down the mountain. So keeping the pelvis a little bit more close would aid in tension of this back leg so that it's not dumping out quickly. Some samples of exercises that you guys can do for that is leg swing step backs. You guys can also do U-Darvish throws, where we're focusing really on the coiling of the back hip. And of course, those drills are also going to be allowed if your hip anatomy also allows for it. because remember, it's not just about doing drills. Drills are good to complement your motor patterning. However, drills alone will not fix this. We have to also go into the gym and target these. And when it comes to going to the gym, we're not only going to fix this by hitting more core and more glutes. It would help, of course, but we need to learn and know how to integrate the body, because when it comes to the stride phase, holding the hinge is not just the glute that's working, right? Our whole entire body is working together. Glutes on this side, the lats on the other side, the obliques are all contracting together to help the athlete hold that hinge. So this is where in the gym we can start training our posterior oblique slings, anterior oblique sling, to help the body create that connection and create better tension when it comes to them actually holding this pelvic tilt or holding this hinge to transfer that energy out and through the hand. We can also focus more on the mobility side. Maybe this athlete has had a lot of overactivity within the adductor area. Maybe he actually does have more internal rotation anatomically. Those are things that we have to know and understand so we can give this athlete the proper steps to help maintain more back leg flexion and more of that pelvic tucking into the delivery. Now, those are just some of the ways that we can go ahead and attack what's happening in the hinge. Of course, if you guys want to get a more specific diagnosis of what's really affecting that, you guys will have to get assessed. For this, an anatomical movement assessment will be very good, where we can now understand what limitations you guys have, what's happening, what's not happening, what needs to be addressed. And as a bonus, which is something that we do for all of our athletes, is we help them understand how their bodies naturally prefer to move, because it is not just as easy as just grabbing all of these things and implementing them. You also want to know, well, how exactly should you cue your body, and to what extremity should you take those steps so you don't get towards an extreme where you're overdoing it so much that it starts to have the adverse effect of what exactly you wanted. So that is actually something that we do with all of our athletes, and how we know and understand what exactly and where exactly they need to move towards. If that's something that you guys need, go down below in the description, book a call in with us to see how we can help you guys next. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.